talk close to the mic.
This is the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom show, The Wake Up Call on WCOM LP, Chapel Hill and Carver, 103.5 on your FM dial. We're live streaming at WCOMFM.org. You can also watch the show on the People's Channel after a week's delay on Thursday night at 10 p.m., Friday morning at 6 a.m., or Tuesday at noon. The show will also be available on our YouTube channel, Wolf Wake Up Call. I'm Iris Schwinzer here with our host, Lori Hoyt, and Emily O'Hara on the camera. Today our special guest is Al McSurely.
Thanks, Iris. We're here again on every Wednesday afternoon in downtown Carborough, and feel very lucky to be able to do this. It's really great. And we're particularly lucky this Wednesday afternoon to have an old friend and a staunch activist for, I think, probably his whole life. He probably started in the cradle causing trouble. Al McSurely. Al, welcome.
Thank you, Laura.
I'm so
Glad to be here.
I'm so glad you could come. And we're here to, our main thing is to talk about this great movie called My Brother Al, that's about Al and Margaret Herring, and it's going to be on Monday. So we're going to talk all about this movie and about Al's work for justice with the Poor People's Campaign and anything else he wants to share with us.
The movies, we'll start with a plug for the movie.
Yeah, we'll start
It's
and we'll
gonna
keep
be,
coming back to it.
Monday night, June 10th at the Chelsea Theater. It starts at 7, but we recommend you get there a little bit early.
Absolutely.
It looks like there's a good crowd coming. The origins of the movie was that Cash Michaels, an old friend of, a good friend of mine, who is called the, some people call him the Black Associated Press for North Carolina. He writes for several newspapers, started out the Wilmington Journal, but now he writes for maybe 5 or 6 African American newspapers in the state, and has made 3 other films, one about the Wilmington 10, and which the picture on the front of this flyer is me, and that's Olinda, my wife, next to me.
Want to hold this up for the camera?
Yeah, good.
Okay.
That's when we were down in Wilmington, and we had gotten Governor Perdue to grant pardons for all 10 of these. There's one woman and 9 men that had been jailed, some of them for several years. Ben Chavis, who was one of the leaders of it, had been in jail for a long time, and had these felonies on their records and couldn't get jobs, and we had Cash and Tim Tyson, a close friend of mine, had been given these notes that this sicko, who was the DA and against these guys, had made when he was deciding who he's going to put on the jury. You know, he'd write Ku Klux Klan by the guy's name and then say, yes, we're going to pick him for the jury. And then he'd write black or N, not for Negro, the N word, and he'd say, no, don't even touch them. And then occasionally there would be a couple of black guys that he would say, possible Uncle Tom, maybe good, or something like that. And when we were given those notes by a friend, and we took those and fixed them up and gave them to Beverly Perdue, properly argued to her, Herb Joyner, and myself, both lawyers for Reverend Barber at the time, and Beverly Perdue, to her great credit, and took a big risk doing it, pardoned them right before she left as the governor. And it was a wonderful day down there, So that's how I got to know Cash as a filmmaker. And he says in the movie that he wanted to do a film of Reverend Barber, but Reverend Barber wouldn't sit still long enough. And and Reverend Barber told him make a movie about me. But you'll see all that in the film about the role of myself, and actually I think it was 3 of my wives. The film is I have several wives, so the film. But Ashley Osment, that a lot of our people in here in Chapel Hill and Carborough remember my 4th wife, and then my 5th wife, Olinda, who is here in the studio with me, and then Margaret was my 2nd wife. We call her the revolutionary wife, but actually now I have to separate them because Olinda is a revolutionary, and so is Ashley. So.
Well, Al, let me just read this little blurb about it. It's called Al, My Brother, which I think is a beautiful title. It's the true story of a white civil rights activist / attorney, Al McSurely, and his over 50-year battle against racism and white supremacy. At age 82 today, McSurely has worked alongside Dr. Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, and Floyd McKissick, among other civil rights leaders. McSurely also helped to recruit, and I remember that, the Reverend Dr. William Barber to lead the NAACP for 12 historic years. Al, My Brother, the movie, is being hailed as an important film about the civil rights movement. So I just wanted to orient people who are listening to this movie. And you're right, it's going to be at the Chelsea. Doors open at 6:30. The tickets are $10 for Chelsea members and $12 for the general public. And you can purchase in advance online through the Chelsea Theater or at the door. And I just want to also mention, as people pay for the ticket, that it is a special fundraiser for the Poor People's Campaign and also Triangle WILF, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, sponsor of our show, folks. And it will be followed by a panel discussion with Al McSurely, Margaret Herring, the revolutionary wife, as Al just called her, a dear friend and a WILF sister, and the director. He's just been telling us about this director, Cash Michaels. And it will be moderated by another dear friend, Mark Dorison, the co-director of the Julius L. Chambers for Civil Rights Center. Yes, it's not on there, the center, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to get some of those basics right out there and come back to that. Okay, so you met Cash Michaels, well, when he had done the Wilmington 10, that was one of his first films, I think.
Well, I met Cash in the very early stages of when Ashley and Mark Dorison and I had our law office above the Rathskeller, 157.5 Franklin Street, which we began I graduated from Central in 1988 and
wow.
passed the bar that same year. Actually, I passed the bar before I graduated. Hope Rice, some of you may remember Hope. Her husband was Oscar Rice, who was the head of the chemistry department. And Hope was a very strong civil rights person here in Chapel Hill for many years. And she knew B.B. Danziger, who father-in-law, Papa Danziger, had set up the Rathskeller, was a refugee from Hitler, and came to Chapel Hill and was introduced pizza to North Carolina at the Rathskeller. And when the movement began here in Chapel Hill in the 60s, the 60s movement we'll call it, James Britton and other people getting arrested along Franklin Street, challenging Jim Crow both at the campus and in the Chapel Hill town. Papa Danziger and then Beebe carried on, would send pizza to the jail, and he would any strong black leaders that developed, everybody that was strong worked either for the hospital or the university. That was the only halfway decent jobs for any black person in the area was at the university, the hospital, and the hospital. And so they would they would fire anybody that raised a finger about the vicious racism that black people in this town had to endure. And so you read people here who will remember Beebe, who was a wild woman. She came here and got her master's in social work, and she right away saw how racist the town was. And Hope Rice set up this interview with me. This was right after I got my degree from Central. And the first question Beebe asked me was, will you sue the university? And she knew about my history in the movement and being arrested and all that before I went to college, before I went to law school. And I said, that's all I know how to do, Miss Danzig, sue people. My lawyers that I had apprenticed myself to for 17 years, Morton Stavis and Bill Kunstler and Arthur Kanoy, who had established the Center for Constitutional Rights up in New York. One of their students was Jerry Nadler.
In the news right now.
Yeah, doing well. Give him, just be patient. He's doing the best he can right now.
Boy, oh boy.
And I said, yes, that's why I went to law school, so I could sue racists. And she said, you've come to the right town. And then Fred Battle, who just died a few months ago, who had already become a good friend of mine, he told me I didn't need to drive to Robinson County. My first cases were, I'd been pulled into cases all in the eastern part and down in Robinson and what I call the Cape Fear River Valley down there off Wilmington, which is just a cesspool of racism still today. We just saw some of that. And Fred said, Al, I hate to tell you this, but you don't have to get up in the morning every morning and drive to Robinson County to find racism. I can show you some right out in your backyard, right here in Chapel Hill. So I'd had both Fred and Beebe. Beebe had hired Charles Jones when he got kicked out of being the minister at the First Presbyterian Church because of allowing black kids that were here during the summer. This is before UNC actually had any black students, but they did have some summer programs that they allowed, and Charlie Jones allowed them to come to social events at the First Presbyterian Church, and he was thrown out of the Presbyterian Church, and Papa Danziger and Beebe hired Charles Jones to be the personnel director of the Rathskeller.
Oh.
And so and she said, now Charlie has moved on to bigger things because he moved and took over the community church.
He started it with some other
he and
folks.
Bill Friday and some other people started the community church.
Yeah.
So our law office was in Charlie Jones's old personnel department for the Rathskeller. We got a big kick out of that when we found that out.
So
Those are the kind of that was the beginning of the law practice, and a lot of people, I'm so glad that we're showing this movie here, because I was very cool about my sedition and contempt and house getting dynamited and various things that had happened.
Before you came to Chapel Hill,
Margaret and
this
me
was
during-
back in
yeah.
Kentucky.
Yeah, that's called the Margaret and Me days, back in, well, both Washington and Kentucky is where we mainly worked. So this is a chance for those people who knew me as just the old white lawyer up above the Rathskeller here, which is was kind of my persona when I was walking around Chapel Hill, to learn about this earlier period of
Which was a very dramatic period. You mentioned being firebombed. You were doing labor organizing in rural Kentucky, right?
Well, it was a very specific kind of labor organizing.
Okay.
Tomorrow is June 6th, which is the 75th anniversary of D-Day. A very important day in the life of the international struggle against fascism and racism.
Yes.
But later on 6/6/66, which is easy to remember, James Meredith, who was a Vietnam veteran and the first African American to go to the University of Mississippi, he set out on what he called the March Against Fear. So we'll be celebrating this anniversary tomorrow of Meredith being shot at point blank range by 2 Klansmen as he set out to march through some of the most Klan infested areas of Mississippi, and he was shot in the face and the chest with shotgun blast. He was taken up to Memphis, and Dr. King and Floyd McKissick, who was then the head of CORE, which is what I started out in, the Congress of Racial Equality. A lot of people in the movement were asked to all come down to Memphis and pick up the fallen sign of James Meredith, which said March Against Fear, and continue that march through the southern part of Mississippi, which is the most, all of Mississippi and almost all of Alabama was run by the Klan at that point. They had the daytime Klan, and which they called the White Citizens Council, and the nighttime Klan, which was carried out the assassinations that they felt were necessary to try to prevent any kind of give in the Jim Crow system that was so deeply embedded in the courthouses and state houses of the South.
And for those who are a little younger, they may not recognize your allusion to the White Citizens Council. Those were the very supposedly respectable business structure and civic leaders, but they were racist and it was trying to put a more polite face on what they were doing, but they were in collusion with what you're calling the nighttime, the out and out ones with the white sheets.
And the killing, for example, of the 3 young men.
The dirty work.
Which happened on the first week of the Mississippi Freedom Summer that Margaret was a part of it, who went down there, and we should get her talking about that. But I mentioned this yesterday at our, we call it the Tillis Tuesdays, like the Moral Mondays. It grew out of Moral Mondays that we have done, and they will be starting up again. But the Tuesday Tillis has been challenging Tom Tillis, who was the Speaker of the House and was the man who worked with Thomas Hoffeller and Thomas Farr. There's 3 Thomases involved. I just realized this. And if you've been watching the news, you know, the late Thomas Hoffeller, he just died a couple of months ago.
And in his death, he's
But
getting a lot of applause.
he's reaching out of the grave with some of his old emails and stuff. It's exactly the same trick that he did for Tom Farr and Tom Tillis over at the People's House. He comes up with this rationale for, he says, the Voting Rights Act made me do it. That's what Hoffeller's theory is. And he said, oh, the devil made me do this. The devil is the Voting Rights Act. Made me draw these maps this way.
Which one of the court said it was with surgical precision.
Yes, that
they
was
managed to
Thomas Hoffeller's maps.
make it racist.
Yeah, and everybody has seen through that, and now they actually have the proof that he did this for this ridiculous and racist attempt to suppress, mainly I think it's aimed at Latinos and Hispanics, who you know, the census taker comes by and says, "Are you a citizen?" That's the question they put on the thing. And Hoffeller says, "Oh, we have to do that in order to make sure we're obeying the Voting Rights Act." In other words, he uses the Voting Rights Act, which was probably the most revolutionary legislation passed, you know, since 1954, certainly since the court outlawed Jim Crow. Uses that as an excuse for packing, you know, white people, and it's particularly devastating to the program that Dr. Barber helped develop, which was the moral fusion. You know, that to break through the you know, what had become sort of what I call the railroad track design. You know, black people do their thing over here and white people do their thing, and somewhere down the road they're all going to meet up. And if you've ever walked down a railroad track, they don't meet up. It's like Dr. King. I said this the other day when I said Dr. King would say the moral arc of the universe, that the arc of the universe bends toward
Justice.
bends toward justice, the moral arc of the universe. But when he sat down next to Abernathy or whoever sat down, he says, if we keep our hand on the plow, you know, it don't happen naturally. That's the point.
No.
This thing does not happen naturally. Everybody has to get out and fight for it.
And
Railroad tracks do not come together. Everything that rises does not converge. These things have to have people pushing, and they have to get out. And if we're going to play in the electoral field, which we did, and we did a damn good job this last election in the House, then we got to, you know, we got to work for it, and we got to do things by the book, and we got to control some of our infantile leftists and other people that are running around saying this is not happening fast enough, or this is why are we waiting over here and stuff like that. The minute you say we're going to use elections, which we did in a sense in 1965 and 66 when we won the Voting Rights Act, and so.
But I want to get back to
Yeah.
what
Hoffeller.
Yeah, with that whole citizen, what I think a lot of people don't realize that this is going to have repercussions for all of us, because what it's mostly going to affect is the urban areas where there are large Hispanic things, and that also that's how money is doled out to the different states is by their population, and also how many representatives they get in Congress. Now everyone gets 2 senators, even if you're a tiny state with hardly anybody in it, and even if you're a big state. But one thing with the House of Representatives is how many people determine how many representatives. And this is going to absolutely just be destructive to particularly the urban, more liberal areas, and I don't think a lot of people have put all of that together,
No.
how dangerous it is,
Yeah.
not only with resource allocation, but also how many representatives you can have.
Yeah, well, you know, if we were in a more normal time, there's no question that this finding Hofeller's emails or whatever, he'd written this long memorandum saying, this is what I did in North Carolina, it worked good down there, he would do it, let's do it here on this census stuff. And,
Thank goodness for his daughter.
yeah, she's the one that gave it up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so she's trying to help her daddy get, I hope he's,
Help him get into heaven.
yeah, exactly.
Wherever he's at.
Exactly. It's called the second generation whistleblower, trying to get some of their fascist parents going up rather than down. But if you go back to this interesting period, which is what we're in, everybody should read. You know, the main name is the Popular Front Against Fascism, that this great lawyer named Dimitrov wrote in 1934 and 1935 when he got out of prison and had beaten Hitler's prosecutors in this big trial for accusing him of burning down the Reichstag when he was nowhere near it. And he immediately went to this big Comintern, they call it. It's all the international, all the socialist parties, some of them had changed their name to communists. You know, that was, no one had ever seen any communism yet, but when they got to the stage of socialism, which was the first stage, then people said, let's change our name to communists, because that's what we really want, is this giant cooperative society. But Dimitrov said, no, let's forget about that for a while. Let's stop. We got a real problem in Berlin. We have to stop this guy. He's nuts, and he is using racism and white supremacy and the perfect Aryan blood and all these fascist and racist things, which he really took from the slave system here. He took some of the laws directly from the Jim Crow South, the Jim Crow laws that had been developed in the 1890s and 1898 in Wilmington.
Al, I just forgot to mention at the beginning that we do take a station break by law, so we've got to take just a brief station break, and Eris will do that. We'll get right back.
Okay.
This is Will's Wake Up Call on WCOM LP, Chapel Hill and Carver, 103.5 FM. You can stream us live at WCOMFM.org.
And I just want to this is when we make announcements. I have one brief announcement. Tonight there is all over the state a Medicaid for All protest going on. And so here in Chapel Hill, it will be at Peace and Justice Plaza at 7 p.m. tonight. And bring your umbrella if the weather looks a little iffy. Lucy said she's going to go after babysitting her grandchild and bring her raincoat. So I just want to get that announcement out. And I saw you and Linda, your wife, nodding at each other.
We have to be back.
Yeah, okay. So we're back with Al McSurely, and what I don't want us to forget, what we are wanting everybody to know about is that there is going to be an important and timely documentary. It's a special fundraiser for the Poor People's Campaign and Triangle Wealth, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, our sponsor, on Monday night at 7 o'clock at the Chelsea Theater, which is over by Timberline, for those who don't know where it is. And it's not the big commercials one, it's around the corner, right down the alley from the subway. And it's an independent movie theater, and they are going to be showing, it's called Al, My Brother. and it's the true story of white civil rights activist slash attorney Al McSurely, who's sitting here right now, and his over 50-year battle against racism and white supremacy. So we just, it's at 7 and the doors open at 6:30. Get there early. I think there's going to be quite a crowd.
Yeah.
Tickets are only $10 for Chelsea members and $12 for the general public. But do remember it's a fundraiser, so if you want to throw in a few extra bucks, it'll always be welcome. Okay, back to Al. Al's not only an attorney, but an astute remember of a lot of history. We've been talking about the early history in Chapel Hill with racism that Al participated in, and going back to what we're facing today, the beginning of fascism and racism in Germany in the 30s with the rise of Hitler.
Right, but the question, one of the things I learned, particularly from Morton Stavis, who was my main martyrs and my main lawyer when they were kept trying to put us in jail for both sedition and for contempt of Congress.
Back in the Kentucky days when you were
In the
firearmed.
1960, well, the contempt started in 1969 and we were in the courts till the 80s. I think 1982 is when we finally prevailed.
Took a long time, and so this is like justice. You get firebombed and you're the one gets arrested for sedition. Okay.
And the problem is to do a sustained struggle, protracted struggle, we used to call it. You have to, there's the song, keep your eyes on the prize, but really we need a rap song. We're working on getting some rap songs done to keep our eyes on the main enemy. Every successful revolution has had that struggle of being deflected and distracted to look at people who are kind of secondary, who have screwed up in one way or another. We listen, although I love MSNBC, and particularly Rachel Maddow and the programs that come on right before and right after her, who in the main keep their eyes on the main enemy. If you think about it, that's what they do. They don't talk about the Democratic Party. I mean, they're interested in some of the candidates and stuff like that, but they don't spend all day, which the rest of them do, talking about, whether Joe Biden is to the left or right, or whether he is conservative or liberal. Those words are so meaningless in this context. The main enemy is Trump, Donald Trump, and the people around him, and we must keep our eyes on that, and we must figure out how to pick up from what Robert Mueller did and figure out ways of making sure everybody understands in their guts what he has done. And it's almost like there's a small group of people who have, I think they're mainly older people who lived through the 30s and 40s. And we fought a war to stop fascism. That was called the War to Stop Fascism,
Yes, it was.
just like the Civil War was a war to stop slavery. So these are major things that we've done in this country, and we should feel good about those things. And for some reason, there's never been only the right wing. Remember that the Charlottesville demonstration was called Unite the Right. And that has been the dream of the fascist movement in the United States, to unite with what? The racist movement, the Klan, to get the John Birch Society and the Klan working together. The Klan is the bigger masses, and the Klan gives them as long as they control, these Jim Crow restorationists is what I call them, want to restore Jim Crow in the South, the 11 Confederate states, and really there were 15 with slavery. That will, they have a base, which is, Nixon figured that out. That was his Southern strategy. And then that's the same address list, the George Wallace address list, that was given over to who? Steve Bannon and Donald Trump. And that was his list that he still is using. That's the beginning of the Donald Trump base. And Reagan developed it in some detail, and the Bushes have used it, and it still is there. So the question that we face is how Morty Stavis used to tell me, he said, Al, in any other country, we would call what we, and he did it too, call racism, we would call fascism. It's fascism. It's not only just holding down a group of non-Aryan people, but it's also promoting a scapegoating kind of a line that says not only are we going to oppress these people and exploit them, but we're going to blame them. And that's the difference between what we call racism. Usually when we use the word racism, we talk about the exploitation, super exploitation of slavery and stuff like that, and of oppression, cultural oppression. But what we fail to do, white people particularly, fail to do is understand that the trick is, and it's the trick that Trump gets away with every day, is to blame the victim for all the problems in the world. Think about that. That's fascism. I rest my case. I wanted to go back to when you said, when Martin and I went to East Kentucky, we were doing Union. It was more than that. We had met with key people in the civil rights movement, in SNCC and in CORE, and we met with Dr. King when he was doing the Poor People's Campaign, and he wanted to move around. But we saw our job as trying to not be quite as clear as I just was on the difference between racism and fascism. But we saw our job as winning white people in the South, good white people, to the civil rights movement. At that time, it was at its height, 66, 65, 66. We just won these magnificent victories, legislative victories. Dr. King, for a period, had a majority backing. 50% or more of the people in the country backed him. He just won the Nobel Peace Prize, and J. Edgar Hoover was trying to put all this stuff out, these lies about him, and he was beginning to reach out and start making his moves on the Vietnam War and stuff. That 66. And the minute he made his speech on April 4th, 1967, at Riverside Church against the war, everybody and their uncle, all the people that were worried about the Democratic Party and the LBJ, you see, all pulled away from him. And so that period, the 66, 67, and 68, that's the name of my book, if you ever get it written. Those 3 years is very similar to this period we're in now, where on one hand, the movement was making that shift from kind of a white liberal-led movement in the South to black power, to what Stokely called black power, and to a much more let black people run this thing and get as many black people as we can. Let's get a hardcore group of black radicals, not revolutionaries. These are people in D.C. These would be people like Marion Barry and people that let's take over DC, let's take over Baltimore, let's take over Detroit City. Those were his thinking. And then we'll sit down, so we can sit down across the table and shake hands as equals.
Yeah.
To make black-white alliances, etc. Because before there was a tendency, every time the movement got started and was going somewhere, white know-it-alls would come in and take over. And so some of that changed too, because we began winning victories. When I say we, I mean black people and black and white radical people. That we had won victories in colleges to get more black history taught, and more black people were going to colleges. We'd won, I've got seven children. Every one of them went to college based on stuff we won in the 60s. People said, "Are you a white savior or something like that?" I said, "No, I did it because I kept having all these kids, me and my beautiful wives, and we had these wonderful kids, and hardly any of them got any debts. Why? Because we got Pell Grants and all these other things." So there's a lot of shifts happening in the 60s and 70s that just took a little while. They took a little while to consolidate this new, and we're at that period now. That's what Nancy Pelosi is dealing with up there. She's got some people who aren't going to be bossed around, and she knows it. And she's got some powerful black, they're not lieutenants, they're her equals, and she knows it, and she's one of the most brilliant women I've ever met, next to Margaret and my other wives. But she is good. She is strong as an ox, and she knows what she's doing. And I recommend to everybody, just do whatever Nancy says, because she knows. She's very close to Reverend Barber, and she calls him up and asks his advice on stuff. So that and every one, almost all the good presidential candidates have had meetings with Reverend Barber, asked his advice about stuff. He will be holding he and an old friend of mine, Art Waskow, who's a radical rabbi, used to work at Institute of Policy Studies, and all the imams we can get, and all the rabbis we can get, and all the Christians we can get will be up there on June 12th in front of the White House. The last I heard, there's about 400 or 500 people. We invite any.
So this is June 12th,
June 12th, not too far away.
and this is going to be.
It's going to be a freedom cedar. It will have it's close to the Muslim holidays, and it will. We're trying to invite, the Southern Baptist seminaries, which Margaret's daddy was the Southern Baptist preacher. And Ashley, my fourth wife, her daddy was the Southern Baptist minister too. And they all worked at these seminaries and taught people what to teach. And they are trying to. They've had a great mea culpa in the last 6 months to try to
Really?
change their curriculum and everything. Southern Baptist, all you had to do was
I hope they
go to a
throw
Bible
Franklin
school.
Graham out of the.
Yeah, well, that
Party there.
Franklin Graham is one of the things that's pushing them to that. So, anyway, I was going to list
Our
a couple of
program
these.
goes on to 5 of. Is that going to be okay?
Yeah, that would be good. I wanted to mention that, the June 6th, and then there's going to be a Congress. The Poor People's Campaign is having a Congress in D.C. that I think will last 3 or 4 days. The NAACP will be having our national convention, which Reverend Barber is still on the national board of the NAACP. And of course, Dr. Spearman will be leading our delegation from North Carolina to Detroit City. That's in Detroit City.
And when is that going to be?
That was,
July 20th through the 24th.
July 20th through the
So
24th.
But on the 12th, it's going to be a big meeting in Washington.
Yeah, that will be
Freedom Seder.
Well, it's more than that. I don't want to just highlight the Jewish part. Art Waskow is the one who has been thinking about this for 50 years. He's my age, Martyrs and my
So
age.
that would be a week from today, next Wednesday, so it'll be an interreligious,
Yeah, exactly.
that
Yeah,
would be a
and-
fairer thing to put.
And to
then-
really challenge, this, the thing that Reverend Barber more and more is really focused on is the ability of white so-called evangelists. He considers himself evangelist. All evangelist means is to spread the good news. It's same term, spread the good news. Bring the good news of Jesus. That's what Christians say, but Jewish and other religions have that same thing. It's, proselytize your beliefs. And insofar as people agree that there's a lot of commonality between some of the great religions, and we want to evangelize them, we want to proselytize them, and they are against everything that Trump stands for. Every one of these religions is against it. We want to do that, and how Franklin Graham or any of these fake Christians
Yeah,
get away with calling themselves evangelists. One thing they get up and preach every Sunday, but to say they're evangelists. So do they think that Donald Trump is good news? And that's what we need to challenge them with.
absolutely needs to be challenged, yeah. So Al, so I just want to get back while we still have time, to this movie. So this is gonna be about your life,
Yeah, well, that's why I didn't spend that much time on it.
huh?
I just want everybody come see this movie, and then I
And
don't have to
that's
tell you
what-
all this other
They'll
stuff.
tell you all that.
I'll tell you what
So if
I'm
you
really
wanna know-
excited about is trying to get rid of Trump.
Yes,
The movie doesn't talk about that too much, although it
and
does
so
a
you've
little
been
bit.
outlining your theories of what we need to do.
Mhm.
Listen to Nancy Pelosi and focus
Well,
on
listen, Rachel
Trump and not
Maddow
get
every night.
deflected with side issues.
Yeah, read the Mueller report. You can go online, it's on the Department of Justice webpage, that's what I recommend.
Okay, so.
And you can get the complete report except for the few parts. It's 95% of people that complain about it are picking up on my friend Jerry Nadler and others, that they're the ones that are fighting for all the rest of the thing. They should, but we don't need to wait till they get the 5% before we start reading.
So I just want to mention that Al believes in the Mueller, learning about the Mueller report so strongly. He's teaching a seminar with some people who are there for the Tuesdays for Tillis, and they're having an actual serious study seminar, 15 pages each week, and then a pop quiz. So
Well, we're gonna send, it's aimed at Tom Tillis, and we're recommending, there's probably, remember, there needs to be 67 votes in the Senate, and right now, we got maybe 48, 49. So we basically need 18 to 20 more votes in the Senate. And there's, most of those are up for reelection. I mean, there's actually more than that are up for reelection, just like Tom Tillis is here in North Carolina.
So this will be votes in the Senate to to impeach.
Yeah,
That's
what
what
we're
we're
trying to
talking
do is tell them if they switch over, then we might, at least we wouldn't run against them at all. We haven't said what the deal is with Tillis yet. I'll be like Trump, we'll see how that plays out.
See how, yeah. So
But the fact is, we believe that everybody who's actually read it, including this one Republican, everybody who's actually read the report has said he should be impeached. There's not one person who's
and how many
actually read
lawyers
it.
did you say were?
1,000 have.
1,000
It began
lawyers.
with 700, now it's over 1,000.
And they've signed a petition about that?
Yeah.
Wow, I don't think you hear about that. That's really important. 1,000 lawyers are.
Anybody who's read the Constitution and understands it.
So Nancy Pelosi, of whom you speak very highly, is not ready to do the impeachment. So you.
She's talking out both sides of her mouth. Some people think that she's worried about the people who won this last election, that they might endanger themselves. But really what she wants, what they're worried about is trying to get, it's sort of like when Obama ran and everybody said he can't win, remember that? And then he
Yes,
did
I do
well,
remember that.
Did well in Iowa. And so if you were to look at the Gallup poll or whatever, before Iowa, he was like 25, 30%. And then after Iowa, when he did so well with the white voters, think about that. Everybody said, oh man, he can win. And he just, it jumped over 50, 60% right then, bang. Well, we're in a very similar situation right now where we have a self-fulfilling prophecy that's negative because all the Republicans, Trump is scared like crazy. Everybody knows that. If you watch, he's putting on weight. I used to be a psychologist, and I've watched his weight grow. His belly's growing. You see that as he climbs up and down the plane? Watch his belly. That's a key sign. And he is very frightened right now, very frightened. He can't control it. I don't believe in this drugstore psychology about him being, he is scared. Every symptom that he shows is scared. And you can also tell by when he does his tweets. These are little tricks that you can do to kind of keep track of it, and you'll be able to tell.
And also, I mean, he's a master at talk about deflection, and keep it,
Yeah.
he's got all this trade stuff going with probably every country in the world, up in arms about trade, so,
Oh, yeah.
there's all the talk goes about that, and not about, the Mueller report, and not about, et cetera, all the ways he's hurting the presidency and hurting the country. He's a master of deflection.
And there's another trick that people, I'm just reflecting on what I hear from all these people I talk with. Our election, for some reason, they started running, the Democrats started running people for election a year and a half before. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
It's so far away, I can barely plan next week. And they asked the reporters, "There's people talking about impeachment?" No, they're talking about, paying the bills and stuff like that. Well, if they were talking to me, I would talk about paying the bills.
Yeah.
That's what people do until, 2 or 3 months before the election. So it's just crazy. It's the cable news kind of thing that we've become addicted to. And we need to get out.
Some have become addicted to.
Yeah, we need to get out and pick a senator that we can work on, or pick somebody that's gonna run again for a state house. Remember in 2018, we got to find some good candidates for doing that and send them over there. And we need to be getting more and more young people involved in running for city councils and school boards and stuff like that. I was reading a thing I wrote about Valerie Fouché. Remember when she was on the school board here?
Yes.
Fought like crazy with Fred Battle and other people. She was one of Fred's proteges, mentees. And we fought like crazy for her to get on the school board, and now look where she is. And she is providing powerful leadership over there. And she was on the, when we did the gay marriage stuff, she was right there, right from the beginning. She understood that, and this was like a Fannie Lou Hamer from Chapel Hill.
This is our own Valerie Fouché.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And so that's the kind of stuff that we could have 10, 15 Valerie Fouchés
Al,
in Chapel Hill.
we have about a minute or two, and we could go on for 2 or 3 hours because your knowledge of and memory of all this history is so crucial. Because so many people have no idea of this background or the context for so much of what we're dealing with today. And I thank you so much for coming on the show. And I want to just take one last mention. This is what we're particularly promoting right now, is to have everybody know about and tell your friends that this coming Monday, June 10th, at 7 p.m. at the Chelsea Theater in Chapel Hill, over by Timberline, is going to be a movie about Al, called Al, My Brother, and it's directed by Cash
He
Michaels,
produced it.
producer, award-winning journalist and filmmaker, and yeah, an inspiring and instructive film for young and old. So we're going to learn a lot more if we come see this film about Al's 80-year history, or a 50-year. I guess he's 82, so I think he's been fighting since he was in the crib. But it's a 50-year battle against racism and white supremacy, and it'll be a fascinating movie with a panel afterwards with Al and Margaret Herring, his revolutionary wife is how he called her, and the director, Cash Michaels, and it's going to be moderated by our own Mark Dorison, who is on our Orange County board of, what is it, the
Commissioner.
Commissioners, thank you, commissioners, and he's also the co-director of the Julia L. Chambers Center of Civil Rights. So it's going to be a big day next Monday. Stay tuned.
Thank you very much.